Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. Just remember not to wave my arms around. I've just managed to squash myself up against the door in between a lot of orchid blooms actually at the moment. Right, yesterday was Orchid Society meeting. I think I can quite safely say that is the best talk I have ever attended on orchids anywhere, anytime. It was absolutely brilliant. So Simon Pugh-Jones did a wonderful job with his wife Annie. He did it as a double act, which worked quite well. And it was basically on propagation. And it was all demonstrated, literally. There was a lot of participation, which you don't normally get. I mean, some of the most boring talks I've ever attended are a slideshow of orchids with somebody stood at the front sort of going, and here's an orchid, and here's another orchid, and here's another orchid on a tree. It's not that entertaining, it's not interactive, it's just being talked at, if you know what I mean. Anyway, this was good stuff. Lots of things were passed round, you know, to pass along the line, and then behind and back down there. I mean, it started off with kikis, so there were some plants with some kikis on, a couple of which were snipped off and potted up, you know, as a demonstration. Then we had dividing, and again a few plants were divided up and shown how they repot them. Everything goes in bark, they don't go near moss. So yeah, it was very good. We had a look at some orchid seed. We had a look at some flasks, and then we actually had a deflasking demonstration where some orchid plants, tiny orchid plants, were taken out of a flask, given a rinse and potted up, yeah, and to be grown on. So it was all very, very interactive and very lots of demonstrations. The amount of screen was not that great, quite honestly. I had to look around the lab and had a look at their greenhouses and stuff like that with the lovely sea view. must be the only orchid nursery I would imagine anywhere that's got a sea view. It's perched on the Isle of Portland, literally on top. Simon said they have to keep their eye on the wind strength, because if the wind gets over a certain amount, the moisture and the rain that lands on the greenhouse is actually salt water straight off the sea. So they have to close down all their vents into their water supplies. So yeah, that's an unusual one, isn't it? But yeah, it was absolutely brilliant. Not much to do for me as treasurer, because I was up the front setting all the camera up and everything to project up onto the screen to do some close-ups and things, which worked quite well. It actually worked this time. Yeah, so this morning, updating all the books and everything, you know, the financial records and everything, everything's done. It was, you know, it was all short and sweet. The money's sat there ready to go banking tomorrow. The only thing I haven't had is the invoice off of Simon for how much he's charging. He couldn't tell us how much because there was a fee for the talk, which we know and agreed to, but his travelling expenses he didn't know until he got home. And we're going to get off incredibly lightly because of the way he works. He's bought an electric vehicle which he charges up overnight at an incredibly cheap rate. So his rate per mile is incredibly low, and he's got, well, possibly a dial in the car. I don't know anything about electric cars. Yeah, so he said that when he gets home he'll know exactly, you know, how much energy it cost and used to actually get to us and back again, and then he'll send me an invoice and then we can pay him. It was well worth it. It was an excellent talk. So that was that. I took in one of the Prosthetia polysepalus. You remember we split that plant up into three, and my friend Helen had that one in sort of part exchange for some garden plants. I've got another clump of the bugle. I planted quite a bit of that last year in various places, and there's only one clump that's come out the other end of the winter, if you see what I mean. All the others failed. It's unusual for what is just basically a wild plant that, you know, I was going to say grows like a weed. Well, yeah. Anyway, and I've got a lovely, I haven't seen the blooms yet, but there's a spike on it with buds on, so I will see it. A lovely, quite deep primula. So find a little place for that that's not in full sun. And I've got some more foxgloves, because again, quite a few of the foxgloves failed. They're no longer there, so we've got some more to bring on. And hopefully now that that mulch has disintegrated and everything, we might get some self-seeding going on in the garden this year. Right, so what I want to talk about today is triggered by what some of the things Simon said about the greenhouses, and he triggered some thoughts for me. It's something I've spoken about on and off at various times, but I thought we'd have a go at it. And it's basically the subject of microclimates, which it's all due to scales. It's all a definition of scale. I mean, you could say the county of Dorset is a microclimate within the country of within the United Kingdom. You could say that Africa is a microclimate on the world. You know, it's all down to scale. You can get like a little area under a tree that's a microclimate in that forest. You can get a microclimate in the fork of a branch on a tree on the shady side, because it's not on the sunny side. Yeah, these are all little places. And from our point of view with the orchids, little places where orchids can grow and do at their best. There's one funny thing that Simon said. He sent a seed pod, Cymbidium seed pod, off to Kew Gardens for their seed bank. You know, it's a historical seed bank to preserve things in seed form, in case there's a disaster or something and, you know, a whole environment is lost, which is possible. They counted them. It was 2.6 million seeds in that seed pod. And I bet if that seed pod was in the wild and that pod opened and was scattered by the wind, I'll bet there wouldn't be that many plants out of that. It goes by mass, yeah? So the more you've got, the more chance you've got a few make it. And those seeds would need a microclimate where they land. Yeah? It would have to be right for them to even germinate. And then even though some may well germinate, but it's still not the right place for the plant to thrive, so it would still fail. So out of that lot, you know, there's a lot of potential problems. So when we're talking about our orchids, microclimates exist in every place where you can grow orchids, from outside in the garden, in the shade, in the sun, under cover, no rain, out in the open, rain, yeah? These are all little climates within an environment. You come into under glass, you've got the difference between a greenhouse and a conservatory. In a lot of ways they're similar, but in a lot of ways they're not. But it is under glass nonetheless. Greenhouses don't tend to have this polycarbonate roof, which is not see-through. They tend to have a glass roof. Automatically they're going to need some shading, whereas I get away without any. And north-facing, south-facing, these are all different climates within a climate. Indoors, get into the home. Lots of people grow in the home, and that's the only place they can grow. You've got the difference between a north-facing upstairs windowsill that's unheated, a cool, not too bright area, yeah, down to a basement with no natural light at all, that's purely grow lights and artificial heating and ventilation and everything that goes with it. A very controlled environment. Now, even within those environments, there are microclimates. Sometimes you can have a group of plants and there's a microclimate for one of them. Yeah? So we'll have a look into it. Yeah. Being attacked from all sides here. Let's try some coffee. Right, so you've got the three main ingredients when you're talking about climates, microclimates, or any climate basically where orchids grow. We're not talking about media, we're not talking about feeding and watering. What we're talking about is light, humidity, and, were you ahead of me? Temperatures. And it's not just the temperature, it's temperature ranges. Yeah? Top, daytime, bottom, nighttime heading towards dawn. And even in your home that probably would be true, but it would depend on the time of year, because some people would have a heating system such that during the winter months their house stays the same 24/7. That's not ideal for orchids. They don't like to have a constant temperature. They like to drop at night. I would say 3 to 8 degrees centigrade drop as a bare minimum. Some, if they don't get a bigger drop than that, they won't bloom. So, you know, if you've got a plant sat there that just refuses to bloom, it might be because it's not cold enough at night, irrespective of the daytime temperature. And it's the difference between day and night that can make the difference. So these are all climatic variables, shall we say. Now, humidity, Simon's on my side. I don't get many on my side. Most people are under the impression that orchids need an incredibly high amount of humidity. This man's been there and done it and got t-shirts, and he sells them. He's been to cloud forests in places like Borneo and over in the Far East and various other places in Central and South America, Brazil, Colombia. He's been there, he's seen it, he's walked in the environment and felt it and measured it. And in a cloud forest, you'd expect that to be the highest humidity you're going to come across, unless it's chucking it down with rain and you've got your umbrella up. Yeah? Not so. It is humid, yes, but in the daytime, he said it's not that humid. Sometimes it's lower than 60% in the cloud forest, because it's not actually raining at that point in time, and the mist and the cloud has got a bit of a break in it. So it's not always high humidity. Now, he said at night time, yes it is, because again you get the temperature drop, up soars the humidity. And he said there seems to be quite a few of the orchids there rely on that to hydrate themselves rather than what goes on in the daytime. And he said then you come down a bit, into the edges of the cloud forests and that, and so the humidity's down 50-60% during the day, sometimes lower than that if the sun comes out. So it's not all high humidity. Some places are, yes, but not all. Now I'm on that side because when I first got here, I brought my humidity head with me, and I forgot that I didn't have the temperatures. It took me a while to even realise that I had much lower daytime temperatures. I don't use any form of humidity in here. It's natural. It's evaporation off the plants. I don't wet the floor, yeah? And at the moment I haven't got a humidifier. I don't know exactly what it is. I'll move and try not to knock all the plants over, because I've got a gadget over here that will tell me. It's currently 68%, and it's around, I have to do an average of two things. It's around 20 degrees centigrade in here at the moment, and 68% humidity. That's plenty, more than enough at that temperature. However, if that temperature was nearer 30, then that humidity is nowhere near enough, because at that point plants are dehydrating fast and they need to replenish that, and they can't always do it through their roots. So we start thinking about the climate our orchids I don't believe it. He's been asleep for the last hour and a half. As soon as I start filming, out he comes. Luckily I'm right by the door, so he's not actually going to be a nuisance. Go on then, scoot. Oh, he is slowing down nowadays. He's plodding along now, whereas he used to sort of trot about. But yeah, he goes outside now and just sits outside the door and looks at the garden, has a look round, and eventually he'll get up and have a walk round. He patrols. useless the paths, which is I quite like. Well, I suppose gravel's not nice to walk on if you've got little paddy paws. So he has a patrol round, he has a walk around the patio. He's got a little path through the undergrowth there where he goes up onto the planted border in the corner and out the other side and up onto the decking. He's made a little path there. Luckily there's only bits of ivy and stuff, there's nothing there he can damage. So yes, but he is starting to slow down a bit now. Where did we get to? Humidity. So there are times when your humidity for individual plants will be too low. Let's take the home as possibly the worst example because it's probably where the driest air is. Out of all the environments we've talked about, it could be the driest air. It could be outside in your garden, depending on what part of the world you're in. Yeah? It can get incredibly dry air outside in some parts of the world. I mean, we haven't had rain here for weeks and weeks and weeks, but the humidity out there isn't that low. It's still there, you know, it hasn't dropped right down. It's not a desert where there's very little humidity. But in the home, you've got an ambient humidity that is probably only around 40–45%. If you've got a form of central heating on that's radiator type based, they dry the air. And it could be lower than that, and that is pushing your luck. Now Phalaenopsis, especially the store-bought, complex hybrids that are bred to cope with the home environment, will probably be okay. They might do a bit better if the humidity was a bit higher, but they'll be okay, they'll survive. However, there are some plants at that level of humidity will slowly die. Some of the more sensitive Masdevallias, Draculas certainly are not going to put up with a humidity that low. Miltoniopsis it won't be. Miltoniopsis is, that's no such word. I must admit, just as a side, I am terrible at putting S's on the end of a genus, and it shouldn't be there. The genus is also singular and plural, so it is a coelogeny, and I have a group of coelogeny. I'm probably going to say coelogenes. I keep sticking S's on the end. It makes more sense to me, and I'm not Latin, so don't see many Lats nowadays, do you? Yes, so there are times when if you try growing some of the plants that do like a more humid atmosphere in your home, you will have to artificially inflate it. Now, let's say that the required humidity was 65% and your home is 40. Are you going to bring your whole home up to 65%? Probably not possible, unless you've got an industrial humidifier, something like Hurricane Hector sat in the middle of the lounge. That'll do it. Not advisable. The noises get on your wick for a start. That's where it got its nickname from. So you can't logically do it. So what you have to do is create a microenvironment. You need an environment where the humidity is higher than that around it. And the obvious answer is you've got choices. Gravel trays with water in, don't stand the plant in the water, make sure the bottom of the pot's above the level of the water, but you will get gentle evaporation off the gravel trays up around the plant, which will disperse into the rest of the environment and become virtually negligible. But immediately around the plant, it'll raise the humidity a bit. It won't do magic. It's not going to raise it from 40 to 60%, but you might be lucky and get 10%. But what you will get is a better humidity at night. Yeah? So that will help the plants. So that's one way. The other way is misting the plants. That's not getting a hose on them. It's not getting a sprayer that produces large droplets of water. It's misting. Yeah? It's the sort of thing you would put up with on a hot day, and you have a little sprayer and you spray your face to cool it down. That's misting. It's not soaking it. And again, misting in low temperatures is not a good idea. In higher temperatures, that water's going to evaporate quite quickly. It's not going to damage the plants. So misting is another alternative. Another alternative is in a relatively small area you can use a little home humidifier, and you can have it set to come on for an amount of time every so often, or you can have a humidistat controlling it with a little sensor somewhere that actually says if it drops down below this amount, turn yourself on until it reaches my agreed level, in which case you can shut down again. The only problem with those is you do need to keep your eye on the water level, because they will have an auto shut off, I would imagine most have. I can see black and white on the door. Come on then. You didn't really want to go out, did you? Yes, which will allow them to shut off when they reach a certain level, and if the water level drops below a level that the machine needs, then it will turn off. But you do need to keep them topped up, and ideally you want the purest water you can put in there, or you'll start getting deposits all over everywhere where the mist goes. Yeah. So like if you've got very hard tap water and you put it in a humidifier, you'll be putting a layer of calcium carbonate, I believe, all over everything it lands on, including your plants. Not ideal. And go steady with a humidifier how close to the plants it is, because the mist that comes out is cold. It's the way it's generated, it's cold. Put your hand in it and feel it. If you've never done it before, it's cold. You don't want that going straight on your plants, unless it's currently 40 degrees, in which case it might do them some good, but it could be a sudden shock. So go steady. So humidifiers can be worth their weight in gold, but they'll only cover a certain area, which is good, because like I said, you don't want to humidify the whole house. Quite honestly, for us humans, a bit of humidity in the air is not a bad thing. Dry air is not that good for us. It doesn't do our sinuses and everything any good. It's nice to have some moisture in the air. As I said, most people are comfortable at around 50 to 60%, and they might not even know it, but that just seems to be naturally comfortable for whatever reason. Not a medical person, but just seems to work. So out here, until we start getting the sun on the roof, it's unlikely to drop below 60–65%, highly unlikely. And if you think about what's happening now, that door's open to the lounge. The heating was on first thing this morning, otherwise I'd have been rattling. We've still got cold nights, but once I'm comfortable indoors, I open the door and I start getting a bit of heat coming out of the lounge. Now that air that comes out of the house into here is dry air, because there is no humidity in the house. You know, it's just relatively dry. And that helps bring down the much higher humidity I get out here at night when that door's shut, because the temperature drops right down, humidity rockets. So we're probably up 80, maybe even 85% at night. But because we've still got cold nights, my heater comes on with the circulating fan, so we don't get any hot spots. You know, one roasted plant and one still shivering in the corner. That spreads it all around. It works quite well. And obviously that's an electric heater, so that tends to have a drying effect. But the plants replace it, so it doesn't drop down too bad. It's not too bad at all. It's reasonably well balanced. So microclimates. What else? Humidity is something that some plants are not so fussed about, and others it's important to them. So one of the things you need to do is sort your plants out, which are which. You know, it's probably not a good idea growing Masdevallias tucked in and around Phalaenopsis. They need totally different environments. One needs to be cool, one needs to be warm. One doesn't care much about humidity, the other one does. Yeah? And plus light. Let's get on to light. Microclimates with light are fun and games. Top shelf in here, bright light. The shelf underneath, not so bright light, but it is still getting light in from the sides. I've got 3 sides of glass here, 4 if you count the roof. Yeah? And the brightest light does come down from the sky when the sun's out. Yeah? And the sun is currently about here on the shadow. Eventually that shadow will move across until in the midsummer at the sun's highest point for about 5 or 6 weeks that shadow line is halfway across the roof. So half of this roof is going to have the sun on it for part of the day. That generates some heat in here. Yeah? Because it's going to get warmer out here, I will need to raise the humidity. So that's when I don't need Hurricane Hector, not in this place. I don't need it 80–90%. Given up on those days. So my little home humidifier will be got out, and that will be got going when the temperature starts to climb, which it isn't doing yet. Sun's not here. And we're not going to be in any form of heat wave at this time of the year in the UK where the temperature of the other side of that glass is something to worry about. We have had times when it was, where we got up over 30 degrees. Well, if it's 30 degrees that side of the glass, it's going to be difficult to keep it cool in here, isn't it? But I didn't manage badly. I think the highest I got in one of those heat waves was 27, 28. Now that's not ridiculously high. It's too high for some of the plants, but as long as it's not for too long. That's the thing. It's if a plant's not in its happy place for a long time, it will deteriorate. But if it's a short time, it'll, take a deep breath and cope with it, basically, depending on the type of plant and how fussy and sensitive it is. So environments for light, you've got in the home, you've got which way your window faces, depending on which half of the world you're in. We could do the what colour's the bear joke again. Not many people got that. Don't know where I got that from. If you haven't heard it, it's based on, it's actually a teaser. It's not really a joke at all. If you're in a square house that's got a window in each wall, yeah, so you can walk up and look out of that window, up to that window, and all of those windows face south, what colour's the bear? There's only one place in the world where that little house could exist. So what colour's the bear? It's pretty obvious. Well, I found it obvious, I got it straight away, but not everybody does. Yes, so light. You can move things. In your home you've got which way your windows face. But within that, you could have, I'm going to stick with my hemisphere now, so the bright light is in the south facing window where the sun comes from. Yeah, rises in the east, sets in the west. So an east facing window gets morning sun, west facing window gets evening sun, south facing window gets the worst of the lot, the midday sun. Well, you can have a window in midday sun because you like the warmth coming through the glass, but you could shade it to block the light out. Yeah? So you created a microclimate for the light on that windowsill. Yeah? Because that might be the only window suitable to put your orchids on. And it isn't suitable with the sun coming streaming in straight through the glass on your leaves. Some will put up with it, don't get me wrong. Some would actually thrive in it, but not that many. Not compared with the number of the variety of orchids there are around. So north facing window, no shade required. It's just not that bright really. My Phalaenopsis are on the kitchen windowsill and a shelf above that windowsill. They face out of a north facing window. No shading required. In fact, during the winter, that's far too dark for them. They stop growing. They don't grow very much at all in the winter. This is just the days aren't long enough and there's not enough light. So it is a microclimate in the house. It is probably one of the moistest places in the house, the best humidity, because I'm constantly boiling the kettle to make my coffee, and it's where I do my cooking. So there's steam and boiling and cooking and stuff going on out there, so it's probably a bit more humid in the kitchen than it would be, say, in the lounge. And if you use a windowsill in the house, a radiator under that windowsill is not good news. That will instantly dry all the air in that environment on that windowsill, and it's direct heat. It's not good. However, I have seen people build a shelf on the windowsill that comes right out over the radiator, and they put foil underneath it to reflect that heat away from the windowsill out into the room where you actually want it. And then they've put humidity trays on that shelf, and they've got plants standing on there that are thriving because they've got that bit of extra warmth without that direct dry heat. They've got some extra humidity, and they're in a windowsill that's providing the light for the light for those plants, chosen specifically. So these are all types of microenvironments. The ultimate microenvironment, terrarium. Because you've shut the outside out. And what's inside should be controllable, otherwise it'll get out of hand. If you totally enclose plants in a space like that, you're going to lose the oxygen relatively quickly. That's not going to be too good. The air will get stale. Even if you have a little fan in there, a little battery operated fan to move it around, it's still not ideal. It needs ventilation. It needs to be able to suck in some fresh air and blow out some stale stuff. But it's a good way to get very high humidity, shutting it all in like that. And then all that humidity collects on the glass and you can't see your plants. I'm not that keen on them, but they can look absolutely stunning. Get, nice big terrarium, all different bits of bark and moss growing up the back, and decent base and branches with orchids attached to them, mounted. They look stunning. But unless you still keep your plants in pots and can move them around, you do end up with it being a bit static, because you've chosen your plants and that's what you've got. But you can get some nice miniature ferns. You could even possibly get some carnivorous plants mixed in there. They can look pretty good. But all that's indoor stuff. If you move out to underglow, it's getting a bit dark. Are we going to get some rain? They said we were going to have some yesterday, we never did. It looks a little bit remote possibility, I would say, but there are some darker, heavier clouds moving over. We really could do with some rain. Yeah, so as soon as you move out to under glass, your main enemy is the sun. I know that sounds daft because, lots of orchids like bright light. No. Sun through glass equals heat. And it's often trapped, it can't get out. Oh, it's all right, I've got windows in the roof, I open that. No, it can't get out fast enough. You get sun in the middle of the winter on a greenhouse and you will raise the heat quite dramatically compared with what it would be without that sun. You've got a greenhouse in winter and it's 4 or 5 degrees outside, it's cold. Rain! I said it felt a bit like it, didn't it? I've got a built-in rainometer. It allows me when I'm out and about to get cover before I actually get wet. I hate getting wet. Anyway, you have to put up with the noise. I doubt if it will last long. It's not even enough to get the patio wet. You can hear it, can't you? But there's not a spot even showing on the patio. It's so dry, it's just disappearing as soon as it lands. Yeah. Anyway, so as soon as you get under glass, your main enemy is heat through the glass from the sun. And you've got to deal with that because I would say there are more orchids than not that don't like excessive heat. Most of the orchids you'll be able to get at and come across that you might prefer to grow would be happy if the heat never went above 25, 26 degrees. If you're growing cooler stuff, they'll be happy at 23, 24. They don't need any more. They'll put up with it, but they don't need it. That's the difference. But there are orchids that need that heat. A lot of the Cattleya types, the Cattleya Alliance, they like that heat. And they can get up 28, even up to 30, as long as they've still got some humidity. Otherwise they dry too fast. So, it depends what you're growing. I'm totally changed, not everything, but I've changed an awful lot because I've now got a north-facing conservatory as opposed to around the other place. It was south-west facing. So it was shaded by the house up until about 11 in the morning, and then it was in the sun until the sun set. So I used to have, in the midsummer, I used to have 11 or 12 hours of sun on the glass. And I used to spend a fortune trying to keep everything cool. I had 2 huge circulating fans on the go. That's, you know, cost-wise, if I was still round there now with the expensive energy that we've now got that we didn't have so much of then. So that's 2 big circulating fans. I had a huge outlet fan in the wall that was sucking the heat out up near the roof, so the hot air rises, gets sucked out, and I had an inlet fan down the bottom on the shady side that hopefully was sucking in cool air. That circulated the air round. The circulating fans kept it going. As fast as I was doing that, my humidity was going straight outside, so we had Hurricane Hector on the go to replace the humidity. That's 5 electrical units on for 12 hours a day trying to keep it cool. And that's on top of the shading outside, which I had to keep putting up and taking down again. So, you know, but it enabled me to grow quite a lot of dendrobiums and get them to flower that were winter resting types, because in the winter the shading came off and those plants were facing sun, direct sun when we got sun, straight through the glass, and that was the bright light they needed to get them to bloom. There's no point in me growing those now. I haven't got the light anymore because I don't get the sun. So we've had to change the types of things we grow. I just about get nobelies to bloom, but only just. So there we go. You can adjust microclimates, humidity, you can do that. Light is probably the easiest. I mean, I control my light microclimates in here by how high up they are on the shelving. I mean, this shelving here has got 3 layers. It's got a top shelf, then it's got a little shelf at the back there, and then it's got another shelf low down there. So, you know, and that is quite shady down there. And I've just seen a plant that should be on it that's up there. But it was because it was repotted. So these are all in bright light, the cymbidiums. They need the brightest light they can get. They go outside in the summer, so they get a totally different environment through the summer months. And I've realised through chatting with others that some of my cymbidiums that didn't bloom as well as perhaps I'd had hoped, not quite so many blooms on the spikes and things like that, it was because I brought them in too soon and they didn't get those night chills. I was too worried about the frost killing the plant. Obviously I don't want frost on the plant, but getting them down to 5 or 6 degrees overnight would have done them the world of good. So I brought them in too early, so they didn't get as much of a chill over a more prolonged period. We'll see if we can rectify that this year. So yeah, just have a think about your microclimates. Some of these elements are in your control. You can get, like if you've got a windowsill, for instance, that's got the right light, you've done something about the humidity perhaps, but it's not quite as warm as you'd like. Well, what you could try is heat mats under humidity trays. So you're putting some gentle bottom heat, but the pot isn't sitting on it. Go careful with that. Lots of funny noises going on out here. I was next door doing some work. Makes a change. That's that side. That's the posh house. It's a lovely old thatched cottage, white building with a thatched roof and everything, lovely garden and everything. Apart from that flaming great oak tree, the bane of my life. Anyway, so I don't know how long this one's been going on, but I've got a bit of a sore throat because following an Orchid Society meeting, I'm doing a lot of that, whereas I don't normally do that apart from a bit of camera work. So I usually end up with a sore throat on the following Sunday, which I've got. Just a bit of a croak, but it's not too bad. So anyway, microclimates are things that you can create for an individual plant, for a shelf, for a windowsill, or literally for a whole place. I mean, this whole place, humidity-wise, is a microclimate because it's different from in there and it's different from out there. So it is a microclimate, albeit quite a large one. That's the humidity. The heat is also a microclimate, but again, it's the whole place. You know, I haven't got microclimates where that bit's warmer than that bit. I suspect when there's nothing running, during the day, there's nothing running because it's warm enough in here that the heater doesn't need to come on, and the fan only comes on with the heater this time of year. So the air is quite still in here. So it would be warmer up near the roof than it would be near the floor, because the air movement has become stationary and heat rises. So it would be a little bit warmer on the top shelves compared with on the floor or on the lower shelves. But it wouldn't be that different. Wouldn't be like 10 degrees or anything daft like that. You'd be lucky if it was more than 1 or 2 degrees. And it's only when the air is still. As soon as you start moving the air around and stirring it up, then it all remains the same. So that's that. But light, I've got lots of microclimates in here. I can have a microclimate for an individual plant just by placing it in a certain place on a shelf. I have got some rearranging to do because at the moment all my cotyledons are on top shelves, and a lot of that is because of how tall they are. So they won't tuck in anywhere because they touch the shelf above, which is a bit of a nuisance with large plants. But it's shadier up that end than it will be up here. But as a consequence, my Masdevallias have now got a shelf full of cotyledons above them. So I've now created an incorrect microclimate because my Masdevallias are in deep shade now. They're not going to bloom in that level of light, so they need more light. So they've got to find a new place now because of the place the cotyledons have just ended up. All this moving stuff around is just, you know, trying to find places where the plants are in their happiest place they can be in. I won't say they're in their happy place because that's on a tree in a jungle somewhere or in a cloud forest where they, you know, where they would naturally be. And this ain't that. But yeah, have a think. Perhaps you think your plants are all okay, and I've always said, you know, something I've said, I haven't said it for a long time, I must admit, is are your plants doing okay? And if the answer is yes, great, but could they be doing better? Yeah? So you can still have a look at your environment, where your plants are, and think, could I get that a bit better? Is there another place that would be better for them? And if so, can I use it? Because you might have the best place in the world, but, you know, that's where you keep your books or something. No, they can't go on that shelf, that's where you keep your books. You know, well, that's where my speakers for the stereo sit. I'm not having the orchids on there. You know what I mean? You know, some places can't be used. So it is worth having a think. Now, my orchids that I have the most concern about at the moment are the Deesas, because although some are starting to grow, I believe I've lost quite a few through the winter, and I don't believe it's as a result of the winter. I believe it's a result of the potting on or repotting process we did last year, and some of them just didn't like it, and I need to try and pin down what they didn't like. So I noticed there's another pot here that's now got no green in it, whereas there was at least some. So we're not going to end up with as many as I first had, that's for sure, but we'll still have some. You know, they're not all lost by any means, but yeah, some of them didn't take to the repotting process. Now I was advised to try and keep the media around them. So if you've got a pot full, you know, split it into 4. Just split the media into 4 and put each piece in some new media. Don't try and get the old media off it, they'll be fine. Well, that may be the bit that's not fine here. Yeah, different environment to where they came from. And it may well be that. Jim at Mather's Foundation, he's got a video about dealing with Deesas, and he washes them off. So he removes all the old media, gives them a shake, gently. You've got to be gentle with Deesa roots, they're very fragile. Tease out, rinse, you know, get as much off as possible, and then gently pot them up. Well, that's totally different to leaving the old media on, isn't it? Especially when you don't know how old it is. Now, we worry about media turning acidic when it gets old. Decers need acidic media. That's why we plant them in peat. So you sort of think, well, it can't really go off then, can it? But, well, perhaps it can. I don't know. So, yeah, they are a trifle worrying. I don't want to lose them all, obviously. But if I manage to keep half of them and grow them on this year and get some blooms, that would have been a worthwhile exercise. And then we think about, bearing in mind, chances are most of them can stay in the pots they're in, so they won't get disturbed at the end of this year. Maybe. Some might need to, I don't know. Depends how vigorous they grow. Depends how many new plants come out, the little plantlets, bulbils or whatever they're called. Yes, so we shall see. And my next trip out is my trip to Mathers, which is on the 26th in the morning, so relatively early start. There's somebody else going from the Orchid Society that I know quite well. In fact, it's Helen, who I've just swapped an orchid for some garden plants with. She's actually booked in for that one. She didn't know I was as well, but I think we're both going anyway, if you see what I mean. But yeah, so I will know at least one person there. Not that that worries me. I just like the place, you know. So that's the next trip out, and yeah, I'm hoping to get to this secret garden, but it's actually Easter holidays at the moment for the schools and everything. I don't want to go there in the middle of school holidays because it'll make me feel uncomfortable because it's busy. Also, if you've got lots of children running around enjoying themselves, I can't film. I can't have other people's children's in my video and put them on YouTube. It's actually not right. It's not only not right, I think it's actually against their rules for a start. So we don't want to get any infringement, so I just don't do it. If there's kids around, I don't film. So there'd be no point in going if I can't film. Well, yes, I'd have a nice day, but it's not the same without getting a few videos for you good people. Oh, and by the way, my Cymbidium tiger tail, I got bullied when I got there. Oi, you, poke. Because I started to set it up in the open class, and people came up and said, what's that going there for? You need to be in the experienced class. I said, well, I haven't got 3 first. No, you need to be in there. That's the sort of grower you are now. Get it up there. And then Helen came up and she said, it's going to get a first whichever section is in. She's a trainee judge. So anyway, it did get a first. It got a first in the experienced class, which is that's I suppose on the competition tables, that's the highest order. Stay. I'm going to take that cane off actually because it's starting to shrivel now. It's the oldest cane on the plant, it's never going to bloom again. And that will leave me with 3 good ones. The plant's done really well. It's done really well this year. And even on last year's new cane, which is this one here, is it on camera? No, just off. That's got buds. It's got a bud on the tip and another one a bit lower down. That's coming into bloom. So, yes, so have a think about your individual climates, sometimes for an individual plant, sometimes better, a group of plants. For some reason, groups of plants tend to do a bit better than singles. And I think again, it's the collective humidity generated by a group of plants. If they would have been in a drier atmosphere without that collective. So there we go, and I've got very little to do today. Apart from sitting here thinking, was that it? Was that the rain that was forecast? There's about 6 drops on the roof that I can see, and they're evaporating as fast as anything. Nothing is wet outside, none of the leaves, none of the ground, nothing's wet. It's done absolutely nothing. So we could do with some steady rain, preferably starting about 5 o'clock this evening and finishing about 6 o'clock tomorrow morning. Steady rain all night long. That would be wonderful. Get down in the soil a bit because it's getting a bit dry, deeper down. Water table going a bit wrong, not getting added to. And give everything a nice wash off. You know, wash the dust off and all that. would do everything the world of good. Just on a garden point, because we've had nicer weather, I've tended to sit out on the bench with Mojo, sometimes for lunch, sometimes just to enjoy the sunshine. I've seen more butterflies and bees in the garden this year so far than I saw in the whole of the last season. So hopefully it's going to be better this year and things are going to recover. It's a bad year last year for all of those types of things. But yeah, I've had quite a few butterflies in the garden, and if the sun's out and I go out in the garden, there's bees buzzing. I can actually hear the buzzing. You know, I don't need to look for the one that's making the noise. There'll be quite a few out there, and I don't know whether I'm going to be able to film it. There's something quite rare that comes in the garden now. You'd have to look it up to see what it looks like, and it's a bee fly. A bee fly, and it's a mimic. It looks a little bit like a moth, it looks a little bit like a bee, it flies like a hoverfly. Yeah, strange looking thing, but there is one that comes on the purple perpetual wallflower quite frequently while I'm sat there, because it makes a different, it's got a different tone to its buzz than anything else in the garden, which is what made me swing round. What's that sort of thing? It was like just here, it was right next to the ear hole. But yeah, a bee fly. I had to look it up because I didn't know what it was. But, there we go. And I'm going to leave it at that. We do the thanks on the Sunday. Thanks for all the support for the channel, especially the financial support, which is YouTube membership, which is not so good because YouTube take a large amount, but it's still appreciated, don't get me wrong. But the patron site is a better bet for making a regular donation because they don't take much. So, you know, most of it comes over to where you planned on it being, which is, you know, in the pot to look after all this lot. And the Buy Me a Coffee crops up every now and again. People still use that. And there's another form of financial one that I always forget, which is I think it's called Super Chat. You see it sometimes in the comments where there's an amount of money with a bright highlight, where somebody's actually made a donation as a comment on a video. That doesn't get used often, but it's there as an option. I wouldn't know how to use it myself. Obviously, if you can subscribe to the channel, that sort of helps, although YouTube doesn't take so much notice of that nowadays. But the thing that is no trouble at all for anyone to actually do, which does make a difference, is do that thumbs up. Yeah, if you haven't done it already, now's a good time before you forget at the end. But yeah, the thumbs up does genuinely help. And obviously watching the videos is great. Leaving a comment, great. And obviously the way YouTube pays out is YouTube don't actually give us creators any money at all. They reluctantly let us have some, but it's not their money. They charge the advertisers to place the adverts on the videos. And they charge money for that, and they very generously give us a bit of that. So that's how we get a bit of remuneration. It's from the adverts. Obviously, no money changes hands with the creator unless at least some of the advert is actually watched. You know, if every advert skipped, then you know the creator's not going to get anything at all, I doubt. Apart from the premium, the people who've gone premium on YouTube, which is a set regular monthly fee to remove all the adverts. And somehow or other YouTube still work out a percentage of the premium fees that everybody's paid relevant to your actual channel, and you get some of it. So you're not completely depriving the creators of some funds by going premium. They still get some. That's nice. It's nice to get anything out of YouTube, quite honestly. Right, and thanks for being here, thanks for listening, watching, doing all that sort of stuff, and thanks for the support in however you can. As I say, the minimum you can do is watch some videos and do the thumbs up. None of that costs money apart from some of your possibly precious time, so thanks for that as well. And I will see you next time for whatever. Bye for now.